Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of the Bleacher Bums podcast. I am your co-host, Cole Taggart. Today consists of an interview I did a while back with a really good friend of mine, head baseball coach over at Tuscarora High School, Cole Shain. We go way back. We go back to about 2012 when I was a senior at Broad Run Baseball. Shout out Broad Run. He did a little bit of time as an assistant coach there. And then as he grew, he was able to get a head coaching job over at Tuscarora, and he's been putting in a lot of really good work there. I actually had the pleasure of being able to coach alongside him for a couple of months before I had to head out to Denver. But really great guy, really good friend. Glad we were able to stay connected. I consider him a mentor of mine as well. Really hope you guys enjoy the interview. And yeah. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to subscribe. It literally takes 2 seconds. I don't want to feel like I'm begging here, but go subscribe right now if you can. Go follow us at Bleacher Bums Pod on both Instagram and Twitter. And if you guys would like, follow, share, all that is greatly appreciated. Hope you guys enjoy.
The size of this guy's thigh,
Right,
and he smacks, our coach on the butt and says, "Let's go get him, coach." I'm like, dang, this guy, he's something else. And he went full ride to FSU as a pitcher. I was like, this guy is, football guy, and he is massive. The ability that he could move and play like that, I was like, oh, that's why you're going to Florida State.
Powell played against Jameis Winston because he pitched at Florida State, but AJ didn't play him in college. He played against them in like showcase tournaments. And AJ's team competed really well. They won a lot. That Braves team he was on, he had a bunch of really good players on that team.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said Jameis was a freak. Like he was throwing 94, 95.
Yeah, that's like Patrick Mahomes. He got drafted as a pitcher too. I think
Kyler Murray.
94.
Kyler Murray was like a top 10 pick. I didn't get to see him play too much baseball, but I mean, just looking at his body type, probably a middle infielder with really good hands and just insanely quick feet. Center fielder?
Probably is fast.
I mean, he'd probably play any position. You can if you, yeah. You can just you can hear yourself a little bit. So, and then I guess maybe just get like a little closer to the mic. You don't have to get too close, but like 6 inches, 8 inches is close enough.
Yeah. Okay. Just give me a testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2.
Testing 1 2 3.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sweet.
I think you sound good, Cole.
All right, good. I think I just don't like my voice.
Did you and I apologize if I should know this. Did you take any time to try and play professional ball at all? Did you play in the minors at all?
No, I once college wrapped up,
Okay.
it was kind of go to school, get my master's, kind of move on. But when I was talking with my buddies, Alfred Rodriguez, who got drafted by Milwaukee, he's like, "Cole, you should have tried out. You'd have been fine." And it's always been in the back of my head. At the same time, it's always, all right, if I went that route, where would I be now? And I'm pretty happy where I am. So I don't try to dwell on it too much. Yeah, it would have been great, if you get your name signed up, go play a few years in the minor leagues, maybe something happens. But you're given this opportunity to finish. I finished my master's 2 years. Yeah. I have a family. I have a little girl. I'm a high school baseball coach. One of the things I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I've accomplished it. So it's kind of hard to go back and think, what if I did this instead? Would it have been interesting? Sure. Do I have, thoughts about it when I watch the TV? Because I'm like, yeah, I'm watching because when I watch the game, I like to predict the pitches that are coming. That's what I did in high school. That's what I did in college.
That's a pitcher's mindset. Yeah.
And it's a lot of fun because I take what I learned from the games, and if I'm correct or if I'm incorrect, I was like, well, why did they make that pitch? And I try to see certain things, and I try to install that in our high school program, the way we call pitches. So it's fun for me because it's almost like a chess game while watching these professionals compete. And yeah, would I have a different approach because of what my arm could do? Absolutely. Some of these guys are throwing, 98, but at the same time, the hitters are hitting off 98. So it's like, all right, how creative can we get with keeping the hitters off balance? So
yeah, and Kyle Hendricks, he's on the Bears. I'm not the Bears, excuse me, the Cubs, right? I mean, he doesn't throw harder than about 90, and he still has some really good years where he'll just locate.
Yeah, it's just like Maddox,
yeah,
right? He had one of the best careers ever, and he located. I don't think that guy would miss a spot, and if he missed, it was on purpose. That's how important location is. A lot of guys who throw hard, struggle with those locations because they're putting so much into their mechanics that they, here and there they'll miss off, arm side because their arm's not catching up, or, they'll bury a ball deep because their arm's too quick.
Right.
So when you're throwing so hard, you have a little bit more room for error. versus someone who is a little bit softer throwing.
Yeah. I mean, I never threw hard enough anyways for it to make a difference.
Hey,
but
no
yeah,
worries.
Yeah.
Hey, when I coached you, you had a great changeup, and that's what makes your
Thank
fastball
you.
look harder.
Thank
Okay,
you.
it's you can throw 96 and still get hit if your changeup's 4 miles an hour slower, right? But if
Yeah.
you can throw 86 and your changeup 78, you create that distance. It doesn't matter, how fast it is. Sure, some people, if you make a mistake, fix their swing and correct it. Absolutely. But if you throw that changeup effectively, that fastball is automatically going to look faster.
Yeah, I didn't really start getting like stronger and like really start throwing harder until the summer after I graduated. I was messing around playing with Dom Craig's dad, Coach Craig's team, and we got to play at UVA, and I think I topped out like 85, 86, and I was like I should have gave it one year, like I just go because I could play at Shenandoah, which is a really well established Division III program, but it was that small time school, man. They had 1,600 students. Broad Run at the time had like 2,000, and I wasn't ready for that.
You gotta set your college expectations. I know when I was in that process, I had my mindset I was gonna go D1 or I'm gonna go enjoy school, and that that's not for everybody, but that's kind of just how I wanted to keep my thought process.
That's
going.
a mindset for a lot of people though, and it was for me too.
And that's not taking anything away from some D2, D3 schools, but it was kind of like I want to be close to my parents so they can come watch. That was in the back of my mind, and I wanted to be at a very competitive level. Maybe it's just me being unknowing of the level and how many other schools at D2 and D3 still compete at a high level. But for me, it was. I had my eyes on Virginia Tech, like that. My older brother went there. I loved the school.
Yep.
So if I didn't play at a Division I, and that was just my mentality at the time. I was young, and I was going to go to Tech, just as a student.
Yeah.
And I do know that some D2s can play very strong baseball, even D3, and beat Division I schools. So it's one of those things that if it's your mentality, go for it. I don't think any mentality fits somebody. There's these coaches are like, D2, D3 is just as good as D1, and it is. Division I, the biggest thing that I've come across at the different tiers of Division I is the depth. Okay, the starting lineups from a smaller Division I to a bigger Division I can be somewhat comparable. But it's the depth. If you have a Division I, you're playing Florida, they're going to pull somebody in and throw starting 95. Well, next guy, he's no different. He's going to be throwing 96, maybe a hard slider. So you constantly see that depth. But at a smaller school, if you could have competed at a bigger school like that in the SEC or the ACC, where do you find yourself? Are you going to come in and try to make an immediate impact, or are you going to, have to work even more and put your time in as a freshman, sophomore to get that junior starting position?
Right.
That could be a factor in your decisions.
Yeah, and maybe this is something you could touch on too. A lot of guys. I mean, there are a lot of guys that slip through the cracks too.
Oh, absolutely.
That just don't get looks. That have to go play D2. That have to go D3. And props to those guys too for having the confidence to know that maybe I do have that D1 skill. I just got to start here. They end up transferring, or they get drafted late and they end up making something out of it. But yeah. So are we rolling now? Everything good? Cool. So I just want to do a quick introduction. Here with my good friend Cole Shain, head baseball coach at Tuscarora High School, played at William and Mary as well as Broad Run. Thanks for being on the show today. We were just kind of going back and forth, but I kind of just want to get into it. I want to know what it's like going through this time right now, being a coach, trying to get connected with your players. Tryouts probably coming up soon, and the season starting in April.
That's a really interesting question. I think it's a multi-layered kind of answer. It's very frustrating because especially with the spring and how it hit. The spring season was canceled last year, and I had these group of seniors as my first 4-year class going over. Yeah. And it was a great group of kids. Like, my heart broke for these kids that didn't get to show off their talent their senior year. And we were going to be a very competitive team that year. And to see them kind of not have their banquet at the end, or, their starting name called up on opening day, it's heartbreaking, because it shows you how much work they put in the past. The year before, we didn't have a great season. Mm-hmm. So they came back out and proved, and their work ethic in the weight room was just so astonishing and so worth it that it's hard to not fall in love with these kids because of the dedication they put. So when it got canceled, it's extremely frustrating. And then now, I mean, we were starting in our weight rooms. It kind of kicked back. We had these protocols in. It was going great. And then the county put more restrictions on because they're trying to do the best they can to keep people safe. So you got people who believe that we need to open things up, and we got people who are, well, how do we open up and be safe? And then it's just about patience. People are getting tired of just sitting around, doing the best that they can with the situation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's, a solution that's going to make everybody happy. I just know for the kids and for myself, it's very frustrating not being out on that field together as a family and then kind of just competing and getting back to something, getting back to distract them from everything that's going around, especially with such young minds that they need something. Sometimes baseball keeps them from, keeps their studies going because they know that if you play baseball or at Tuscarora in any sport, you got to have a great GPA or, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's tough to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine it just thinking about when I was a kid going to high school, like as much as I didn't like being at school, it was a way to get away from home. Luckily I grew up in a great home. So, it wasn't as, terrible for me to be at home, but I mean, going to school, seeing your friends, and then I was playing a sport more often than not. So knowing I was going to go to baseball practice later that day or hockey practice or whatever, golf, it's a good feeling. And, obviously they've been stripped of the ability to do that. So how have you as a coach been able to stay connected with them, communicate? Like how often can you lift at all with the team? Like what's going on?
We can't access the facilities, and then there's the rules put in place in terms of can I have practices outside the facilities with my team, and unfortunately with the high school coaches you can't. So what we've done in this past spring, we did workouts via Twitter and we did post. They had a 24. We did this challenge for mileage. We totaled up all our seniors' numbers in mileage, and they had to reach that number by the end of the summer. And honestly, I don't think I put it high enough because the kids finished it in like
Pretty
3
easy.
weeks. So I was like, oh my God, and I'm trying to run with them, send my stats, and then I'm like dying. I'm like, oh Lord, I can't do this anymore.
What was the challenge?
So they just had to, we had to run the total amount of miles that all the senior jerseys numbers added up to.
Which was what?
Oh my gosh, I couldn't remember. I know I had one senior whose number was 34. So we had that, and then we just kept adding it. It wasn't too bad. Probably around 150, 170. I wouldn't say that much, but to finish that in 2 weeks with the whole team coming into it and coaches sending me their stats too, it was just a really cool way to honor kids.
Yeah.
And it was still fresh, so people didn't know what to do at the end of spring. We were told that, all right, seasons are canceled kind of deal, and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I keep these kids, positive, but at the same time respect that, it's tough for them. And if I keep bringing it up, am I bringing it up too much, where it keeps reminiscing, or are they going to be able to move on? Come this fall, we were able to start working out back in the weight room. We had our protocols, they would sign in, fill a survey, take their temperature checks, and we'd move forward. And then recently with, the spike in COVID cases.
Working out with masks on and all that stuff?
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'd work out masks. So we would have, a certain amount of kids in the weight room. So we had to be creative. We would have to stagger. We'd have to use different, equipment at certain times, and then we'd have to spray everything down. And then the next group would come in, and they would use the other sets of racks that weren't being used, and then we'd spray it down and clean it all again. So it was an efficient process. I think it was a good process, and I wish it would continue. But I get decisions. It's tough because the county, their backs are against the board, and parents, are frustrated too. And it's where can we meet that middle ground kind of deal? And right now, all off-season sports are canceled because of the, I don't want to say threat, but because of the mass flow of kids going back into school for sports. I know for off-season workouts, you have a schedule and you have all these other kids going during their sports seasons. And I get their point because they want to keep that sports season alive. Whoever season is in.
Well, they're doing football now too, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
so football got pushed into February, and that means we got pushed back. So right now, with everything being on, I'm glad we're having a schedule, even though it's condensed. Usually we have 20 regular season games. This year we'll have 12 and playoffs.
Okay. That's not terrible.
It's not terrible. They're getting something, and that's all I could wish for. I get it. There's certain protocols that we have to take, and this is a compromise that I can get on board with.
Right.
And I get why off-season practices are canceled, because that could endanger potentially the in-season kids that are playing. Like, oh my God, the student athletes are getting COVID, but it's my season. If my season gets canceled because of an out-of-season, I can see where the frustration goes.
Yeah.
But I can also remember that the spring sports was the only season that got canceled last year, and it's one that should be prioritized this year because those kids last year didn't get that chance. I had parents come up to me and say, Coach, and I thought this was a great idea. And he's like, Coach, what, if I had the ability to hold him back a year, would you do that? I was like, it's his experiences. What does he want? Kind of deal. I can't really tell you yes or no. I think it might be an idea that you want to go seek out and get a season back, because these kids are missing that experience. I know high school baseball was one of the best times of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you move to college and you play, it's a business. It's in and out. You're up at 5:30, getting in the weight room, 6 o'clock, going to class, study hall. and practice again, and then you're traveling. So it's a business, when you sign up for that, you're getting a brotherhood, you're getting that competition level, you're getting some experiences that nobody else is, but you're also giving up a lot of things that kids like to go to college for. So when you take a year away from that in high school, it hits, I think, in a double effect, because if a kid's not going to play in college, well, then they just lost a year that they could have that fun competing again with the kids. If they're going to college, well, it's still going to be fun. It's still going to, challenge you in college, but at the same time, the high school, you played with your kids growing up, the buddies that you grew up. In college, you're going to make your new friends, and you're going to develop even stronger relationships there too, but you still missed out on that year, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, and I can only imagine, again, like it's heartbreaking to have to take the season away from them. But looking forward, obviously there's some positive things ahead. You're going to be able to play in April, condensed schedule. How are you getting your guys prepared? Even though you guys can't necessarily be together right now, how are you getting their minds right for tryouts, being ready? Because, when the time comes, you guys do have to be ready to go. And even though the season is shorter, that means you got to probably win more games to go to the playoffs. And, the expectations might be a little bit higher, I guess, in that case.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be quicker. You're not going to be able to have that lull. You're not going to be able to start the season, win a couple games, and then go.
Any preseason games?
Still unaware.
Okay.
Our full schedule hasn't come out yet. I've been close with Tony, and we talk a little bit, so I have an understanding of what our schedule is going to be. But I do not think they're going to give scrimmages, so we'll just have to be creative and do inter squads.
Right.
But you're right. It is going to be quick. It's going to be condensed. So you have to be at your competitive best every game. I mean, I think maybe our first week we might have 3 games. Now, with our district, we're only playing our district games. So if you play teams twice, the second game's going to count. So you're really only playing each team once, except maybe 3 teams who you'll play twice, and the second game will count towards your seeding.
Okay.
And that's how they condensed it from 20 to 12.
Okay.
So we dropped 8 games for that. So you're right. You can't have a bad week. You really can't, because that's 2 games that could cost you. So it's really that's the hard part as a coach, is how do you keep kids motivated, especially if they're not motivated the same way. That's the difficult. All right.
Well, yeah, because
can I get on this kid, or do I need to? Hey, you're doing a great job. Keep going. All right, dude, I know you can do better than this. Give me something. Show me something that you can do.
So you're saying you coach each guy differently, in a sense.
In a sense, I think you have to.
Yeah.
I think personalities might dictate that, and sometimes I get lost in that because I'm very competitive, and I'm still young, and I reflect a lot, and there's certain things that you're going to look back and you're like, you know what, I should have done this, or I should have pushed here, or I shouldn't have pushed here, and there's never going to be a one way to coach. The biggest thing that you can create is that culture, and I think we have it, and especially last year, some of my, the way they worked, our work ethic in the off season has never been in question. The culture's been there.
I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, so it's just maintaining that in the season. And when games get spread out, sometimes it's hard because you have a lot of practices.
Absolutely.
And sometimes,
it can get dull.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, we need to get through this. There's no fun way to do this because we need to get through this part of the segment. Sometimes you can create competitive things in practice, and other times you just need to get through it in terms so that they understand, the philosophy and the trust in the process. And that's huge. And we tell that to our kids, just trust the process. And that's a loaded question. Some kids just don't understand it. Coach, you keep saying trust the process. No one asks you that. When I was playing, you tell me something, but why are we doing this? So I can learn, because I knew what I want to do.
There needs to be an intention.
There needs to be an explanation. Hey, guys, you're going to be at practice, or you're going to be at volunteer hours at this time, and a coach doesn't show up. I don't get that. We're in it with you too, so we're going to get there. I'm going to get there. If we have 6 a.m. lift, I'm not going to send someone else to go lift unless I can't be there for a family emergency. I'll be there at 6 a.m. right with you. So when you talk about culture and things, how it progress, that whole thing, that trust the process, starts with that trust and loyalty, and that trust and discipline. I think discipline's even bigger than work ethic, because discipline leads to a work ethic. It's not, can you show up when things are going well? It's, can you show up and give us everything, your teammates especially, the best that you can when things didn't go well? All right, I'm back at it tomorrow, And
that's a lot to ask from a high school student too, because they're still growing as humans, and again, like that's got to be tough. But again, you've entrusted these guys with the discipline and the work ethic to do so. You've been there for four years now. It's going to be your 5th season.
So yep, last year was going to be the 4th. This will be my 5th.
What's the makeup of the team right now? So you got how many seniors, juniors, all those?
So our numbers hurt. You know,
Yeah.
before last year, we would have maybe 23 kids at tryouts, and we're competing at schools that had 60. So you can already see the disadvantage that we have in that, and that can just be, you know, where our school's located, you know, and who we pull out for baseball.
I mean, there's a lot of different other high schools, and
we
you
have-
can pretty much go wherever now,
I think
right?
we have 4 high schools within 3 miles of each other in Leesburg.
Does that include Riverside? What are the other two?
Heritage and County.
Heritage, that's right.
So with Riverside opening, then they opened before I got there. I know opening that school took kids away, like it just sheer population,
Yeah.
you know. And when you have 60 guys trying out, it's always a good problem to have, you know. Even though cut meetings or meetings are absolutely the worst to have as a coach, it still gives you opportunity to see what's out there. But at the same time, these kids that come to Tuscarora, they're coming to Tuscarora, and that's what I love. I don't, you know, some kids will go here and there, you know, like you said, they can go pretty much anywhere these days. I want kids who want to come to Tuscarora. I want to win with the kids that are coming to, and if we take our bumps and bruises, so what? But these are the kids who's, when they choose to go there, their heart and soul is in that program, even though they know, you know, the history that might have been there.
Right.
You know, the loopholes are tough. They're certainly tough, but I get it. You know, kids want, you know, certain exposure, but I want kids to make their point. You know, when I played football in high school, one year we were 0-10, and then we got a new coach that came in, and we went, you know, to the Dulles District, then we won the Dulles
Is that
District.
when Burnett came along? Yep.
It was the greatest feeling ever because your work paid off. You know, so when we take that chance of hard work away or that opportunity away, I think it's a lost opportunity. It's an opportunity to prove people, you know, that, yeah, we turned this around, or, yeah, you know, we took some, you know, bumps on the road. And
Right.
with 20 kids, I love them. Every single one. I get to know them individually because I get to see them throughout kind of deal. And we're competitive. They're competitive to the heart and soul, even though some games might not turn out the way we want. They show up the next day.
Yeah.
And that is fantastic to have. This year, off the top of my head, I honestly don't know the numbers yet just because we haven't been informed of who's trying out for it. But
Yep.
on average, we had 18 guys in the weight room,
Okay.
which is fantastic when you look at the numbers. We might have 23 guys total. And some of those guys play football. So there are other sports, so they got to go to the other sports.
Right.
And I love the fact that they do that. I think cross-training is great. I think people who just stick to one sport, they're losing opportunities to learn how to train a different way. You know,
Yeah, let's talk about that
Sure.
because I was a multi-sport athlete, not like at an extremely high level, but I played golf, hockey, baseball. You played football and baseball. Did you play any other sports?
I played basketball before I got into high school.
Basketball. Okay, because you were a pretty successful quarterback at Broad Run as well. Like I mean, there's two different takes, right? You have because you look at the really successful golfers, like some of them just play golf their whole life.
Sure.
A lot of the hockey players, most of them just played hockey their whole life. But then there's those other people that have played multiple sports, and sometimes those guys are just way more athletic than everybody else because they've cross-trained, they have different movements
Certainly.
that you wouldn't get from just playing one sport. Would you say that's important in your players when?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the cross training is huge. You know, do I love seeing my guys every day that are just baseball? Absolutely. I think it's great.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful bonding thing. But being a dual sport athlete, I mean, not only is it just different in the training aspects, like we're going to do certain lifts different than in football than we are in baseball. You know, baseball is you're going to take care of your shoulder blades, you're going to take care of your core, your legs, you're going to have tree trunks, you
Yeah.
know, and a strong core.
Absolutely.
We might not bench press as much as a football guy.
Not that necessary.
Exactly. So when you look at things like that, you're going to get different training. So I think that's huge. But ultimately, I think it's a huge mental break. It's a mental change. You can't approach certain games the same way as you can approach another sport. You know, it's different.
It gives you the opportunity to see situations differently in different perspectives. Absolutely.
Baseball is a game that can speed up you like this or slow you down, and all the pressure falls on you. You know, football is the same way. Football taught me how to handle with stress, especially, you know, guys are bigger than you and they're chasing you down. So it's like, all right, I got to be extremely smart on how I do this and kind of go that way. I have to trust the coach that he's going to call the right play. I have to trust my guys, you know, up front that are going to get the job done, just like I have to trust, you know, in baseball. You know, all right, if I throw this, you know, pitch right down the middle and I want him to hit it, I'm like, guys, we're going to go attack this guy. I don't care. He's went 3 for 4 with 2 bombs. We're going to go after him. That's me trusting my guy on the mound to get his job done and him trusting the other guys behind you. So the trust is the same in all the sports. But the process of thinking is slightly different. And
Yeah.
I think that makes you a well-rounded person. I think that, you know, it teaches you how to handle certain situations that might occur in one sport that actually transpond to the other sport that you come across. You know, I know being a quarterback and a pitcher, I don't think I would have been as successful as a pitcher if I didn't play that position.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of, success and fail on those two spots. If I shank the bed and, on the mound, that's on me. That's not on coach calling pitches. That's on me. If he called a pitch and I didn't execute it the correct way. If I throw an interception, that's on me. If I fumble a snap, that's on me. It's nobody else. So when you have if you take that responsibility, and it only gets stronger as you play multiple sports. You get a field pressure. Say you're the best player in football, right? But then you're not going to feel as many pressures or challenges as you would if you're not the best player on there. So it gives you that opportunity for growth, right? I think I was a much better pitcher than I was quarterback. So in baseball, I was lucky. I had an arm. I was lefty, so I could move the ball. I had good location. In football, I had to work harder for, things like that. I know I had a younger guy breathing down my throat, and he was much more athletic than me. He had a strong arm.
Was it
Jessup? Yeah.
Yeah, it was Chris
And
Jessup,
he played baseball with us, too. So we had always had that, friendly competition going back and forth. And I know if he got an extra snap, I was like, what can I do to get better?
Yeah.
I'm sure he felt the same way.
For sure.
So when you have that, it just makes you an overall better athlete. When you keep just perfecting everything that you're good at, what are you really challenging yourself with anymore? So having that two sports, and some people are just gifted and can play those two sports and be successful at that. I'd venture out to go try something different because it's only going to help you in your sport become better.
Yeah, that's a good. Absolutely. What was it like going back and forth from throwing a baseball to throwing a football? Was it much different? Were you long with the football too?
There's a switch.
Yeah.
Definitely, because sometimes I would long toss with a football. And maybe I'm wrong here when I think back, but I think Roger Clemens.
Well, training with the football is actually really good for pitching, right?
Correct.
For baseball or just arm strength in general.
And even one better sport to do that is swimming. I didn't access swimming until we got to college, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to drown on the first practice in the pool, kind of deal. But
got you guys doing laps?
They had arm care laps, races, competitions, and oh my God, it was a lot of fun. But it's like, oh my God, see, this is where cross training helps. It's like, I feel so much different in terms of soreness than I would have in any other sport, and you're going to get that. I know I have quarterbacks.
Different muscles, all that, yeah.
Absolutely. And it's like, so from quarterbacks to baseball in terms of throwing mechanics, they're very similar. You need to have your strong core, you need to have your legs, you need to have your shoulders, and you need to have your arms. But how often, and you can maybe talk from your experience, do quarterbacks at the high school level, and maybe they do, I'm not as familiar with their weight training program as I am baseball. How often do they take care of your arm? In terms of your scap series, your shoulder exercise, because it's the same motion.
It's probably I bet you they take a lot better care of it now than they used to.
Right.
Because even for baseball, like because I pitched my senior year, but I also played center field. You long toss, like you should ice a lot.
Oh, absolutely. I think every player should.
Every player, not just pitchers. But it was pretty much that was kind of just it. You just iced, right? There wasn't like a lot of stretching. Like luckily, my senior year when I was pitching a lot, you were there to help me out when you were coaching, and you would warm my stuff up before the game, and I was like, wow, like why haven't I been doing this for 4 years?
Yeah.
And it was better for recovery too, just because my arm was more prepared to throw that day instead of just going in, long toss and throwing in the pin. There was just that other element that just made things much smoother.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from experience now. I wish I knew a lot more when I was younger.
Everybody does.
Yeah, and that's that's the tough part, and that's the reality of it. You're not. Right? You're going to always know more when you're older, especially if you're doing your due diligence. But in college, and going back to the football thing, and I'm sure it is better. It's just what I experienced. You did your lifts, you did your power, you get stronger, explosion, right? But what's taking care of the little muscles when your big muscles fail? And when I got to college, the pitchers actually had some quarterbacks working out with us from the football team. So that was really cool.
Voluntarily? Or
No, that's part of the program. We were very similar weight training programs.
So they just put you guys together.
Depending if they could make their training session or not.
Cool.
Sometimes
That's very cool.
So we'd see them doing, their arm, shoulder stuff and everything, because eventually my junior year, we had the quarterback. He came out and played baseball for us, and he ended up throwing like 92 off the bump. I was like,
was it pretty solid?
I was like, you bastard.
Yeah.
I've
been doing this my whole life.
Yeah, and you're coming out here, 92. And then he hit a home run in practice. And I was like, dude, man, come on, share some love. But learning all that stuff, because when I got into college, I was very fortunate to be at a spot where I started throughout my whole career. And from that freshman to sophomore year, I had some arm issues. And the first thing I go into the trainer's office, they tell me, Cole, raise your arms. So I raised them up. And she said, hold them there. I'm going to push them down. They slapped my arms fell so quickly. I was like, what in the world just happened? She's like, your shoulders are extremely weak. That's why you're having arm issues. And so that really made me think, all right, so I went through the rehabs with that. You know, I went and did all these exercises. I focused on it. And the trainers, you know, we wake up early, go to trainers. They would massage it. They would get your oh man, what do they call it? Stim hooked up to you, and even some heat before you start doing some things, and they'd do some exercises. They would even roll out. One of the most painful training days was they'd try to get, they call them crispies that were in your arm, and they take this boomerang, like a plastic boomerang, and they just grind it on you.
That. Yeah, that's
and
brutal.
oh my gosh, did that not feel good?
They did that for my knee when I had knee surgery.
Yeah,
PT.
it doesn't feel good.
Oh, no.
So
No, it
it's
does not
like,
feel
all
good,
right.
but it helps.
It does. It gets rid of that scar tissue. It helps. So it's like, all right, how do I not feel that again? So you got to take care of yourself. So taking all that, and I think rehab helped a lot in terms of what I do for lifting in high school.
Well, what was the lift that helped you the most with strengthening your shoulders?
Honestly,
Was it
just
one
the
specific lift?
No,
or?
it was a combination. It was a combination of body weights things. It was a combination of just movements. You could be laying on your floor with your hands in the middle of your back, lower back, and just raise your elbows to the sky. And it's just the pinching of the scaps. One of the best exercises is simply just, getting 5-pound dumbbells and going through a series of workouts with those. But a lot of times they are fatigued. So you lose your form. You can't lose your form in those. And that tends to be the best exercise for it.
What would you tell, I mean, I'm sure you tell your players all this all the time. What would you tell young guys that are looking at, not even just pitching, just looking at getting into baseball and staying healthy and striving for longevity? What would your advice be for those guys?
My advice would be to not overdo it when you're feeling great. I know.
Okay, so when you're feeling money, don't go out just throw 120 pitches because you feel
It's early. Now, if you're trained for it, that's a completely different story, right? So I just sent out our long toss program for February because it's time to pick up, and unfortunately, I can't work with them, so now they're going to have to take it upon their own to follow this long toss program.
Yep.
We made sure that in our message that you guys cannot go past 60% right now because for the most part, there hasn't been opportunities for them to throw.
And it's cold.
So it's like, all right, they're going to have to really take ownership on it. And when the kids take ownership on it, they're going to trust it a little bit more. So the biggest thing, and I was a culprit of this when I was younger. Oh my God, my arm feels great. I'm going to go throw 180, Next day I'm on the bench because I can't feel my arm, but that's not how you build up anything. You don't go your first day in the weight room, squat 200 pounds.
Oh, then you can't go back for a week because you can't walk the next day.
So it's trying to get that mindset that your arm works very similar to how weight training works.
Yep.
So we have a series of it. So the best thing advice would be for longevity is start early and progress. Don't go full out right out the bat. You can increase your intensity week after week. If you go 90 feet today and you go 90 feet Wednesday and you go 90 feet Friday, stretch it maybe to 110 on Saturday. That next week, if you're still staying at 90 feet and your previous intensity was 60, increase your intensity. Doesn't mean you need to go distance, right? Because when you go distance, my philosophy in long toss is I want you to stretch it out. When we work in, that's when we're working on throwing it on a line, getting back on top. Because when you're stretching out, if you're throwing it on a line all the way out, it changes your release point. And sometimes that's hard to get back. So when you go out, one of my pitching coaches, and I'll never forget that, he's like, when you go out, I want you to lob it to land that ball on top of your hat, your partner's hat. And because what that did was it forced your arm to go through its full cycle, its full extension. So you're stretching it on the way out, trying to land it on top of the head. So now when you start working in, start getting on top of it and throwing it on a line. And if you long hop your partner, so what? But every time your target should be chest to thighs when you're long tossing on your way in, that you can get back on top. And that's where the strengthening part comes to. And you only spend a few minutes at it. When you're at your furthest peak, you're not staying there for a very long time. You're not throwing too many, but you also don't want to work in too quick. It's a cool down, but
so you like them to work in after they.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we hit. Let's just use
that's always a
numbers.
weird feeling too, because you're so loose, and throwing from 30 feet is tough after long tossing like that.
Yeah, but think about it. When you're on the field and you're pumped up and you get a ground ball at you and you want it, you have to get rid of it. Do your mechanics stay the same, or do you, because you're rushed and you have to get rid of it, do you fly open and you airmail it to first base, right? So when you're at that distance and you overwork that intensity coming in, it simulates something at a closer distance where you need to put some oomph on the ball. So that's where I like to get that strength, and then we'll cool it down at 10 feet, nice and easy, quick hands kind of deal. But going out, in my perspective, in my mind, and in my opinion, is just stretch. Nice and easy. Get it out there. Because when you get to certain, you're definitely going to have to use your lower half. And a lot of kids like to show off their arms at 90 feet and step and throw. Great. Use your legs. That's where your arm comes from. Your arm's a lever. Your leg's where the power comes from. So use them. And that'll build you up to even go further than
Little
what you're
crow
on.
hop.
Yeah.
Yeah, something-
What's
yeah.
wrong with a little crow hop, right? Nothing. Exactly. Get your body warmed up.
I
right?
think sometimes kids mistaken a crow hop for having a lack of arm strength. Like, oh, it's not cool to crow hop from 90 feet.
Yeah. Not at all.
Not
at all.
Looking back on it now, it's going to save your arm, and you'll probably end up throwing the ball harder too.
Right. And it warms you up. You know, when you warm up in the gym and you're going to do bench press, it's not just a great idea to, you know, get your arms loose kind of deal, but you want your whole body loose. You want your relax. You want the blood flow. So when you move your feet, you're adding more blood flow. You're increasing it. You're getting your heart rate up. So it helps versus a stagnant throw, one arm to go.
Yep.
You know, because long toss is a warm up. And to get better, coming in is that intense part to get things going. And to be intense, you need to be loose. You need to be warm. You need to have a good heart rate.
Right.
If not, you're just going to fall on things and you start to air mail. More times than not, I see more air mails coming in because it's getting on top again.
Right.
You know, so it's one of those things that it trains you. Yeah, stretch out, go. Keep going. When you're feeling great, come back in. Don't overextend it. So the best advice would be is trust the process, slow it down. You'll get there. Set an end goal. So for instance, for our tryouts, I want our pitchers probably ready for a 60-pitch bullpen. So right now, the first week would be, you know, long toss 90 feet on, what did we put? I think we did Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
When is tryouts? When are tryouts?
April 12th.
Okay, so they'll.
It's about 2 months.
So and you already have that program running, so they should be
so
ready
we
to
just
go.
the first week is this week, so starting up.
Cool.
So hopefully
Exciting.
they can get out, you know, without the snow, get some
Exciting.
fun, go enjoy something, and get back to it with a set of plans. You know, this first week, you know, I can't remember off the top of my head. I might have put, you know, pitcher flat ground, 10 pitches, fastballs only, 60%. Right? That's just getting on top, working on your arm location. Then 10-pitch bullpen on Saturday, you know, all fastballs. Because the big difference between quarterbacking and baseball, when you're on a mound, there was a study, and I can't remember if these numbers are accurate, but it was almost like throwing on that downward plane, it's like throwing 40 pounds or something, the way that the positioning and your biomechanics happen.
You mean
It's
from flat ground?
No, on a
the
mound.
mound. Okay,
Yeah, that
okay.
decline in the mound adds weight to your arm. Even though the ball doesn't change weight, it's the physics of it that are behind it that increase the weight. And I would love for you to double check on to
Interesting.
see if that weight happens.
Yeah.
But I could remember a study doing that because why else is your arm pretty sore after, you know, pitching like that, right? Versus if I could throw 60 pitch flat ground as 100% and I would throw 60 pitch bullpen 100%.
less
Why
work.
am I feeling two different things, right? So there's studies behind it, right? So it's important that you have a process, and it's important that you take your time and you set your goal, right? If you have 10 pitches bullpen, you have the best 10 pitches, right?
Yep.
And you move on.
Yeah.
Even if you're feeling great, all right, I got, you know, quality over quantity. You hear that all the time, and it truly does matter.
It is true. I guess while we're on coaching philosophies, what's your? I mean, you guys still bunting? I know that's like a
Absolutely.
dead thing. Yeah.
So it's really interesting because
It drives me. Well, look, it drives me crazy just because I was a good bunter and I thought, as an element of surprise, a drag bunt at the high school level, even at the college level, like you guys that run, and your corners aren't as talented, you put it in somewhat of a good spot and you have good wheels, like that's a free base hit. And for guys that are slumping, that's when I always used it. I'm not hitting the ball well. Like, all right, I need to get on base. I'm the leadoff guy. I need to go make something happen.
Sure.
That was always the best way to get me out of a slump too. So
And I think that's a great approach. I think when you go to bunting, it forces you to see the ball deeper, right? You have to follow your eye or the tracking the ball all the way to the barrel, or it's not going to be successful. It was interesting that you brought that up because I am a huge small ball guy, especially if you got to look at your lineup. One year you might be, all right, I don't need to play as much small ball.
Yeah.
And I can just let's go rock, and you hit it as gaps, right? Or singles and gaps. Other years you're going to be like, all right, I don't have that potential to just unleash and go gaps. So we're going to have to be a little bit more
gotta
creative.
move things around.
So that's where bunting comes in. I think bunting, when that runner is safe, is the biggest mental challenge for a defense, and especially that pitcher. Right? I think that is like the ultimate, you know, in your face. Yeah, I just bunted onto you, right?
Yeah.
Kind of deal. It's like, oh my God, I just let that happen. So now you're thinking about that, and you're not concentrating on the next pitch. So I think it's a mental shift, right? I think bunting is a great tool that every ball player needs to have, even your four hitter. Last year, I think our four hitter, you know, he could bunt the ball great. And would I put a squeeze on with him? Absolutely. You know,
And that's something Coach Whedon actually got us to do because he was Coach Whedon.
Oh, absolutely.
He was kind of, you know, a crazy guy about making sure every single person was able to bunt. Because again, if that four guy's let's say he's slumping, bunt.
It's
Bunt.
the best way to help your team out. You don't want to come out of the lineup. I bet you, I'll guarantee
Do
you.
you want to strike out or you want to bunt?
Correct. If you have that tool in your bag, you're going to give yourself a better option to be in that starting lineup.
Absolutely.
And I was listening to a podcast from the TCU coach when the pandemic hit, and it might have been in the summer. And he brought something interesting to me, and I've been going back and forth for it, and I'll let you respond to it as well. He says we don't sacrifice anymore. And I was like, what? This is a guy who runs, a successful program at one of the highest levels. We don't sacrifice anymore. It doesn't mean we don't bunt anymore. It's the language that they use. I'm not sacrificing myself to get out, right? I'm going to put the best bunt down that I can be safe and move the runner. And
that's
I was
a good point.
That is a really interesting mindset, and I extremely like it because it's saying, all right, I'm sacrificing. I'm just going to put the ball in play, and, if I get it to where I need to,
it changes the mindset of the hitter. Like, okay, I actually have the opportunity to go and get on base.
Right.
Because, there's nothing scarier. Let's say you're on third base or not even in a bunt situation. Let's say you hit one of the shortstop, it's kind of dribbling, and the guy at the plate has wheels, and you can hear him down the line. You're like, oh, I gotta get rid of this. I gotta get rid of this. And if you're busting your butt down the line on a bunt, and people start to freak out. They're like, oh, I got to get this off, and they'll sail it, and then it's just
it's wheels,
boom,
wheels, and that's a big thing, especially if you are, if you're a really good drag bunter and you see that third baseman kind of lagging, or even first. I think one of the most underrated bunts is that drag to first base between first base and second base, because now you got three players trying to communicate, and if you don't practice that a lot, you're going to have the pitcher that runs over there. All right, and then the first base calls it, but the pitcher's stuck, and then the second base is trying. There's
probably a lot, and probably a lot of teams at that level aren't necessarily perfectly sound at bunt coverages too. Like it just naturally happens. Mental mistakes will happen if you can catch somebody off guard.
Because most of the time we don't practice defending a push bunt that far or that hard, right? I think watching you bunt in high school, I remember you did it all the time, and I had a player, Becker Kaufman, who was fantastic at putting that first between the first baseman, past the pitcher, and that second baseman, forcing those guys to communicate. And that's one of the hard plays because people forget. I want the ball, so I don't communicate very well.
It's kind of a hard throw for both lefty and right, because the lefty has to kind of turn his hips. If you get it up off the line, that's a really hard throw.
Well, think about that throw from the second baseman, right?
Yeah.
If they're fielding that in the grass on full speed and they got to get rid of it, they have to really do a good job
backwards
opening their hips and keeping that shoulder closed so that they can sling it through there, because there's no way they're going to be able to plant their feet if the bunt is done correctly.
Yeah.
But most guys are like, well, I want a good hitting average. Well, bunts help, right? If you can bunt,
base, no error,
that is a hit, right? If you sacrifice and you don't, it doesn't hurt you.
Doesn't hurt.
So I don't, it only lets you see the pitches better, right? And so bunting, I think, will always be in the back of, or in our playbook. And maybe, this year I changed the terminology. Maybe we don't sacrifice. Yeah, understand that it is still a sacrifice play, but our language for it might be slightly different, because I do like
it's a good lesson to teach too.
That even though it's a sacrifice, guys, you're still trying to do the best bunt that you can, and you're not dogging it to first. You're trying to make a play, because if you put a bunt down right, and that guy's moving, and they're trying to get you out, and you're busting it, and you have a great bunt, and then something happens, now we're spinning everywhere.
Even if you put down a bad bunt, let's say you bunt it right to the pitcher it's a little hot. He's standing on that mound. Cassidy taught us to all come off the mound first and then make the throw. But some guys, they're kind of like freaking out. They make that throw, and their front foot is going down the mound.
Yep.
Now their angles are changing. It could easily happen. Granted, some guys can adjust and make that throw, but there's a lot of room for error when you put a bunt down in the field of play.
Exactly. That's why in your defensive practice, you have to practice that. You really have to, we have this, we call it the chaos drill. And we have three pitchers on the middle of our field. And this is a drill I learned at college, and I thought it was one of the most important things because it's high-paced. If you're not paying attention, you're probably going to get rocked by a ball, potentially.
Or chewed out by the coach.
Or chewed out. That being said, and it's not chewed out by the coach, because of potential. If you're not paying attention, this is fast-paced. You might get hurt, right? So we definitely take the safety precautions, and our guys do a great job. So what it is you put three pitchers on the mound. So you have one in the middle, one on the first base side, one on the third base side. They're each working with their own catchers. So the guy in the middle is working on bunts or balls back to the pitcher turning two. So now we're working on that. Now the guy at first base side, and I'll explain that what they're doing first before we continue with it. But the first base side, he's doing bunt coverage first base coverage. So it either is a bunt, it's a slap to the second baseman, like it's a hard ball, or it's a pitcher cover first.
So he's got to be ready for a few different plays.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the guy on third is working on that, bunt wheel route, right? Where our out, we need to get that guy at third. So he's working on that. And not only is he working on that, but we might mix in a hard bunt to the third baseman where we have no shot at the guy at third, and he needs to come up and make the play and go to first. There's no live throwing to the bases except for at that specific base. So, for instance, if the third baseman came up and fielded and had to go first, he just goes through the mechanics for it.
Right.
So all pitches come in at the same time. So the guy in the middle say, all right, 1, 2, 3, pitch.
Sounds
so
like
all
chaos.
throws come in. Chaos,
like
right?
chaos,
So, and I'm the lucky coach that's stuck behind the guy in the middle. So you got 3 balls coming at you. If one's high, you're like, so now you got really good trust in your catcher.
Yeah.
And so the catchers are still working with that group. And if I yell runner, each catcher has to throw to their base like they're stealing. So the first baseman comes back, and it's a back pick from the first base side. The catcher behind the dish has to throw it like the guy stealing second, and then the catcher at third does a back pit play to third. So it just keeps everybody on their toes, right?
It's a great drill.
And that keeps the coaches on toes, because when I yell runners, they can't throw a ball out, or, then the play's on and kids are confused kind of deal. And the pitchers shift through. So not only, and it's such an effective drill because you can get everything done in 15 minutes if done correctly.
Yeah.
And you just keep shifting, and then you switch players with positions, and it's a really good work on communication too, because you got to be focused, right? So the defensive side is just as important as the offense, because like I said earlier, if you can bunt, you are going to drive a team nuts.
Absolutely. Let's talk about you a little bit. Obviously, you're you're a father now, a husband. What's the work-life balance like right now? I know you got a little more time on your hands.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right now she's in daycare. She's moving around the house. Sometimes she yells at me. I think she gets that from her mom, but for the most part, I love every minute of it. My wife does such a good job with balancing everything. She's incredible, because sometimes Brooklyn will only want mom, and she has no problem with that. She keeps going for it. And
That's a great name, by the way.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah. So we had a funny story. We actually had to use an app to find names like that. I guess that's what it is now. Usually you go read baby name books, you go do this. And I was like, Cole, you should try this app. So what happens is, I'm not going to say it's like Tinder or things like that for baby names, but it's funny because they give you a list of names, and you'll be like,
funny.
You know what? I like this one. Is it Coleman? I don't like that one, so we're going to skip that one.
Oh, excuse me. Hold on.
And then, so we like this one, and if you like it and they like it, it shows you a match. So then you can have a conversation. You can sit down at the table. You can play. You show all your cards. This is what I like. No, I don't like that one.
How long did that last? Did it, like a day, or was it like
Honestly,
a puzzle, like where you had a few?
It was a couple days where we were looking for just some matches, because you don't get the same process of names, right?
Yeah.
And we found it, and we're like, that's it. And that's what it was. And, her full name's Brooklyn Ray. We named her after our grandmother, and the spelling is RAE, which is named after her grandmother's middle name. Or so we kind of combined it with that. So it was really cool. But balance it, it's some days are long.
Because you're teaching too. Yep.
So some days are long. So I'm a hybrid teacher. So I would be distance learning, and then we went back into school. So I got to see my students, which was fantastic, for about 2 weeks before things hit again.
Middle school?
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade, okay.
So I love that age. They're just great kids.
Yeah.
And so we go in for the 2 weeks. The kids are great. They're happy to be back in school. They're excited to see their friends. It's precautions. So, there's protocols in it. So it definitely does not look like a typical day. Then we got kicked back to distance learning. So now we're all on computers. So Brooklyn, as much as I would love to have her at home during those days, both her mom and I work at home. So if we had that at home, it just wouldn't be able to work. So in terms of work days, I'm on the computer anywhere from 7:30 to 3:30 in the afternoon, potentially even later.
Yeah.
Because you got baseball afterwards, and you got to create the calendars and potential things like that. So it's tough, because I'm a guy who needs to. Would I be successful working at home if it was my own? Maybe.
Right.
But I love being in the building.
Yeah.
It's a change of scenery.
Absolutely.
So when you have long days like
it's
that,
a different type of focus too.
it is.
Yeah.
And one of the best things that I got, one of my colleagues, Seth Alberts, he's a teacher of fourth grade, and he's a football coach. So we kind of go back and forth about how to, how having a kid and then being a teacher, because that's kids too. So it's like, how do you give your kids in your classroom everything you have, and then also give that to your kid at home, because every kid deserves it. So it's draining. It is
Are
physically
most
draining.
coaches teaching?
For the most part. I know.
So that's good though. I mean, there's like a relatability. There's a network. You guys can kind of bounce things
There's
off
very
each other.
few that are at an elementary level.
Right. Okay.
A lot of guys and women are high school teachers. Now, I do know some that were elementary, which is even more interesting to talk to. I know one of my coaches that I got on the staff this year, great guy, good ball player. He loves kids more than anything, and he's very loyal and disciplined, and he loves the game of baseball. He came out. He's a third grade teacher at our school, Mark Wojcik, and so he has that elementary aspect. I think, if the coaches work with kids, I think it's ultimately better, because and here's the thing, as an elementary teacher, you get to see the progress from that level to the high school level. So I get to see all of it, which is really cool. And the tough part is I teach all the kids that go to Briarwoods.
So
okay. So
now
I'm going to be coaching against them. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, you guys are great. I love you. I'm going to have to see you on the other field, which is great. And this is my 7th year teaching. So some of them are high schoolers now. So, and I think some of you will even play baseball.
That's cool.
So it's going to be cool seeing them on the other side kind of deal.
You could start the recruiting process.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd be like, what, kind of deal. But going to that, I don't even touch that with a yardstick. I think, I just, like I said, I want guys that come to my school.
Absolutely.
And but it's definitely gonna be fun to see these guys, because the kids that I get, there's every kid that comes to my class, it's a great kid. It's like one of those things. Going back to coaching, it's like, all right, how do you motivate this kid? Well, it's the same thing in elementary. So I got to kind of try to tie, even though they're completely different age levels. You kind of get to see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And you get, the 4th graders are still willing to please you. And then the high school baseball players, they're on the field to learn to get better. So they're not going to, for the most part, disagree with the head coach. And you know what? If they disagree, I want them to.
In a respectful way.
Way. And I want them to ask, Coach, why are we doing this?
I think that's super important, asking questions.
Correct.
I ask a lot of questions. And, at I guess surface level, it kind of looks like, why is this guy asking so many questions? Like, does he not know anything? Well, I just want to know more.
Yeah.
I want to know as much as I can. And I think it shows engagement too. Like, if you're looking for guys like I don't know, do you guys name captains?
We do. We have.
Are you looking, you're looking for guys that are seriously engaged, that are leadership.
Captains are, a fun process for the kids, and it's a fun process for coach. Like, you might have 2 captains chosen by players and a coach's captain. Okay. Because
so you'll have a few.
So we have a few. I think last year we did 3, which was great, and it's a respect thing too. And I've contemplated putting C's on their jerseys too, but unfortunately those are like permanent. So each captain would have to have the same number.
Yeah,
versus,
I think it's a good opportunity to put responsibility in their hands.
Huge.
Obviously, like they're not coaching the team, but at some point, I'm sure you want to see those guys kind of take over. Like, this is your team. I'm the coach, but this is your team.
Yeah, so. And one of the coolest things, and I'll talk about it all the time because I love this kid to death. I worked with him. We had some challenges along his way too, but he's that I think that builds the relationships even stronger. One day after practice, he had the team aside. He's like, guys, if I hear you talking during coaches, when coaches going over something, I'm going to take us down at the end of the practice and we're going to run. And I was like, that's it. Captains are not necessarily the most popular guy, but they are seeing the same goals you have, and they're holding each other accountable. The things that you get in trouble with high schoolers and their friends, it's not holding each other accountable. Some of my best buddies, and I'm still best friends with them, they held me accountable.
Yeah, but it's not like the
it's
cool
not disrespect.
thing. Well,
I know.
It comes off as like, you sound like a parent, know? But you have to be able to brush that off. Like, I'm doing this for the betterment of the team. I want to make us better. And
sure.
I remember when I was coaching with you for a couple months, and we were like, the people were getting out of school and we were lining up, and everybody was kind of turning around like, what's going on? And I kind of got it because you told me like, hey, like if something's out of place, like,
go ahead.
And I was like, what the hell are you guys doing? Yeah. Your coach is talking to you. You guys are turning around looking, and
it's just high schoolers being stimulated, distracted. They put in the work, and that's one thing. And
and you don't always want to be the bad guy too.
No, you don't. You can't, right? And that's sometimes it's great to have the assistant coach where guys can come to. And they go. Like my staff, I don't want everybody who agrees with me on my staff. If you agree with everything I say, you won't be coaching with me. Yeah. That's me coaching with the same mindset. I want ideas. I want different things. Cole, why'd you do that? I think we have, this drill I think can accomplish what you want in an efficient way, in a more competitive way. So let's run it. As a head guy, if I have an outfield coach, I'll be like, look, this is what we need to work on. You come up with the drills. Because I want them to buy into what they're instructing. We'll have a common goal, and how do we reach that? And they go off and create their own little things. And for me, if I was as a pitching coach in Rockridge, Paul Koch did a great job. He's like, Cole, take your guys, do what you need. And I thought that was the coolest thing. He trusted me, and it gained more passion from me into the program versus just following a script. When you're stuck and you're following a script, it's tough. Why do I want everybody agreeing with me? I want to hear if I have a great idea, I want to hear what they think of it. If I have a dumb idea, I want this coach, that is dumb. Tell me, all right, I want to hear the idiocracy that it's coming out of my mouth. Sometimes I'm like, all right, I got 1,000 things running, and I think this will be great. No, Cole, it's not going to work because you want to do this, or we want to do this, and you're like, you know what? Yeah, let's table it. Let's see if we can come back to it. I want different perspectives. I don't want everybody the same. That's not good. You don't make any progress that way. So I look for coaches that are willing, that number one, are loyal. And that's kind of how I look for captains too, right? And kids love captains that are loyal. You're going to have a popular guy who should come up to coach, hey, this so-and-so is feeling this. Maybe you can talk to him, or maybe we can try something. Because if coaches respect the players, and for the most part they do, they will ask them, hey, what do you guys want to see in practice? I know when I was coaching you guys, we had a conversation in the bleachers, if you remember that, when things weren't running, if we weren't competing at where we all thought we could. And I was just, what do you guys want to see? What do you want to do? What's going on? What's going on in the locker room? Because as much as we like
it, Broad Run,
as much as we like it, is like we don't know 100% that goes on in the locker room because either some kids don't have the courage to tell the coach.
Sometimes you don't want to either.
No, you always should have an idea just in case, for safeties and other things like that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But in terms of, coaches, why are we doing this, this, and this? That can ruin, morale, especially if you're going through, a cold streak and then you have a span of practices, right? So now you're managing, all right, do I give these kids a day off? Do we have a conversation? Do we keep, so you need these guys that have the courage to come say, hey, coach, you know what? And then tell us, and coaches, we won't be offended by it if it's in a respectful way. Everything goes back to how you deliver things, right?
Absolutely.
And when you come up to coach, expect us to give you a very mature and very honest response. And some kids like that, some kids don't, and that's just a maturity level. That's something that they're going to have to grow up with, right? I might go into my boss's room and he's like, Cole, you need to change this, this, and this in your lesson plan. All right, I'll work on that. Even if I'm like,
it stings, I thought it stings a little bit, but that's
how you grow,
part of life,
right?
Yeah.
It's just how you grow. If everything was sugar-coated, you wouldn't push yourself to, fix it. If you're feeling a little uncomfortable, it gives you that drive to, I don't want to feel uncomfortable again. Everybody goes to that feel uncomfortable being uncomfortable thing. You don't really understand what that is until you're pushed into a situation that you've not experienced before. And that goes back to playing two sports, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're playing one sport and you're great at it and you're working, that doesn't mean you're not working hard to be that great, but you're not putting in something that's unfamiliar.
Yeah,
so
that's a really good point.
And being in that unfamiliar is like, all right, say you had a team that was not in the championship the previous year and then they make it and it's the first time. Well, now they're uncomfortable. How do you handle that adversity being uncomfortable? So
yeah, absolutely. Kind of wanted to touch on what goes into putting together a lineup, right? Like on the consistent basis, because some guys will get hurt. Now I don't know how much of I'm assuming probably if someone gets COVID or I don't know how you guys track that. Maybe the game just gets canceled. I have no idea. But I'm assuming guys are just going to have to be prepared. What goes into putting together the best lineup every single time?
In terms of the pandemic, I'll let you know when that happens.
Yeah.
But you always got to have two plans, right? It's also a little bit about scouting, right? All right, let's say.
And your depth, too.
And your depth.
Yes.
You're absolutely correct. And, all right, I can't use this arm today if I need him to start on Friday. So you have a lot of that. So when you have only 23 players, oh, my God. My JV assistant or my JV head coach for the couple of years, he actually ended up changing schools for teaching, so he couldn't make it back this year, but we still talk every day. And he would get so mad at me when I pulled kids from JV because we only had 23 guys. So he'd be like, God damn it, Cole, why are you doing this to me again? And so it's interesting and it's tough, especially when you lack the depth. But what's fun is if you have competitive kids, then you have options.
Guys wanted to play different positions.
That, or they'll do what they need for the team, right? And they might come up to you and coach, why am I doing this? If they have have that conversation, because if they want to change something, they got to come talk to the coaches. We'll give them the honest opinion. I will never just be like it's the betterment for the team. I won't do that. So you will get an honest answer from me, kind of deal. And when you have depth, it's great because you have people always going for somebody's spot. When you lack the depth, it's kind of tough. So you don't have as many guys that are competing for certain spots. You might have, 9 players start and you're only carrying 13. You only got 4 kids that, well, he can't play this position or he can't play this position, but he can certainly play this. Now,
that's only 5 other seats you got. So they have to be prepared to play a position at some time.
So in terms of lineup, It depends on like I won't put a right fielder always in right field potentially.
Does it depend on who you're playing?
Yep, and it depends who I'm throwing.
Okay.
If I have a guy who's going to rely mostly on his fastball and he throws pretty hard and the lineup's going to be more righties, I might put my strongest outfielder in center and right field. Yeah. Okay. Because if I put them in on the inside, the strategy changes, right? A lot of coaches, it's fun going from pitching. It's like, for instance, if I have a runner on second and I got a guy throwing on the bump, I'm like, we're going inside. A lot of guys think, well, that's my powerhouse. The coach, why are we going inside? Well, what happens when they pull the ball? Mm-hmm. The runner can't advance on the ground, right? Because it's in front of them. Mm-hmm. It's a shorter throw from left field to home plate in that aspect. Does it always go to plan? No.
Yeah.
But you got third baseman, you got your shortstop, and you got your left fielder.
But if it does go to plan, that's the best.
It's great.
Yeah.
Right? But again, that could be any plan you set out.
Because you either freeze the guy at second or he makes a running mistake and moves to third, and you get the lead runner.
What's the hitter's approach?
A righty there. Mm-hmm. I mean, you want to put it the other way.
Right.
Yeah.
And an inside pitch is extremely hard. So
unless you got Derek Jeter up there, inside not ball.
And unless you got a guy who is very mature in his approach and will, try to get it that way, or, all right, it was inside pitch. I got pitches to work with. Now on the flip side offense, all right, I'm trying to work to the opposite side, right? Mm-hmm. If it's inside and it's, inner half and that's a pitcher's pitch, I might not swing at it. Nothing wrong with that. You're seeing a ball, you have an approach. Mm-hmm. You might now be aware that if you just took an inside pitch, you showed the pitcher that he can go there again. Mm-hmm. So now when that happens, you might as well turn on it and try to drive that to the left field. Right, so it's a give and take kind of thing.
Are you calling pitches?
I think I will this year. Last year,
so you haven't in the past.
I haven't.
Okay.
My first year going, I was very fortunate enough to have.
Because you were just usually running third base.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So my first year coaching, I was very fortunate to have. I stand corrected. I did call pitches my first year there. He was a guy that I trusted to coach third. He played George Mason. He was a catcher, so he understood the game. So he could have called pitches or coached third. Mm-hmm. Pitching is like my baby. I like to do that. I like to think through that. So I would, if I could, I would love to stay a pitching coach, or not a pitching coach, but a guy who calls the pitches. So the other couple of years, I trusted the guys. They followed a process, and we've been pretty successful. And I've gone to third. Sometimes I, let a coach call third base and call the pitches so I can understand the game and what we need to do. That doesn't mean they're not watching me for signals that I want to put in. And it doesn't mean that I'm not behind the pitching guy saying, hey, let's try this pitch here. This might be the situation we're in. What that does too is also build responsibility for that coach. My third baseman coach, he might be my hitting coach, right? So if he sees something that we need to work on, it's his responsibility. He takes pride in it, right? It's just like me, kind of.
Makes a lot of sense.
So
I like to back up. Do you work closest with pitchers? Or you? I mean,
I float.
I mean, you're the CEO.
Yeah, so I float. Yeah. I don't think I can. Mm-hmm. I think if you start to do every little thing, it's micromanaging, and that just is not.
Makes sense. And the reason I ask, obviously, because you've had an extensive career, pitching.
Every place I've been before, as a head coach, I was a pitching coach, and I enjoyed it. And this year, I got good guys. I got a new coach, Garrett Croson. He'll be a varsity assistant, and I respect him and I understand it, and he's a competitive guy, and we have the same philosophies. So he'll chirp in my ear, Coach, what do you want to see here and here? Right now, my plan is to put him at third base box, and I'm going to do the pitching again. Okay. So if I'm calling the pitches, then yes, I am going to work primarily with the pitchers and their bullpens, which that means I need to be able to trust, which I do, these guys to run, in and out or certain things. But when we're doing bullpens, we're not going to be doing team defense together. Mm-hmm. Then we'll all come together and we'll take our perspectives, right? It'll be more during individual sessions. Like, all right, outfielders, you're going in the cage. Infielders, we're doing an individual skill session. So when the outfielders are hitting, infielders are doing their individual skills, I might go to the bullpen now and work on pitchers who are doing that. Now, my pitchers are on different rotations. It depends on who's relieving and who's starting. Those bullpens will be different.
Mm-hmm. How many lefties you got? Any lefty pitching?
Yes, I'm very excited. He was an 8th grader last year, so I was excited. And he played JV.
You gonna show him your move?
Maybe. I don't know. I like to keep my move hidden for the first couple practices because we always have steak dinners on the line.
Oh, okay.
Ben, if you're listening to this, you still owe me a steak dinner, and so do you, David Drummond.
I remember Drummond.
Yeah, he owes me a steak dinner.
Oh, my God. Well,
or breakfast biscuit from McDonald's still.
Coach Wheaton always used to tell a story about your team because you played with Brian, right?
I bet my wife knows this story, too.
Well, no, he would always talk about before they had like these rules where you had to throw a certain amount of pitches. He said he'd bring you in from either left or right field, go pick a guy off, and then he'd send you right
Yeah,
back.
so
out
I'd
there.
be at first base, and I don't think I was fast enough for the outfield. I'd be at first base, and oh my God, I remember we were playing Virginia Cardinals. My wife knows the story; she could tell you because every time we see Jim, either at the local Clydes, or going things, he always brings it up, which is great because I love reminiscing in those stories too. And he pulled me in, and he looks me straight in the eyes, and he looks at their first base coach straight in the eyes, and he says, "You're gonna pick him off." And I get my warm-up pitches in. I picked him right off on the first pitch, and I was out. He pulled me out right after that. He's like, "You're done." All right. And so I went back to first base, and I was like, that to have that confidence and
cool.
to be, some people might think it as arrogant, but that was one of the coolest feelings to have that confidence.
Yeah, he had no problem like playing to his strengths because with the team that I played on, like we were pretty strong. I think you guys had like the much better team in terms of success. But he had no problem like highlighting his best players.
Yeah.
So.
I will always accredit to my baseball knowledge to him.
I do too. I would
It's
not.
where
I
I
would never
started.
been as good though. I never would have been as good.
He had his methods. Some people agreed, some people didn't. But I also played football under my dad, who also had his methods. So I was used to the voices and things like that.
Yeah.
And I will always accredit Jim with teaching me how to play the game. I learned a lot from him that prepared me for that high school level. And then even further, and you'll hear stories. I remember one practice we were, we're sitting there, and God forbid we held the ball in the outfield, a little too long. He literally
There are
went
no
to
bases
second.
in the outfield.
He picked second base up
And put it.
threw it in the outfield, and say, "Do you ever see this in the outfield?" And we're like, "Oh boy," and we're like 10 years old at this, and
shook
everything.
up.
But if you could handle that, he always had the kids' interest best, and he
Yeah.
taught the game the right way. And and I respect him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. My first day ever playing for Coach Wheaton, it was at a practice. I can't remember what field. It was Crittenden, but it was the Windmill. So it was right by Crittenden. Yeah, we were playing there. And I was like, I want to play shortstop. I was pretty good little league shortstop. I want to play shortstop. And, I didn't know the cuts.
Yeah.
I did not know the cuts. I lasted about an hour. And then he's like, go to center field. And then my butt was in center field for 7 years.
Yeah.
Probably the best thing he ever did for me. I could still play. At the time, I didn't. He gave me an extremely short leash, and I just think he needed me to play center field.
Sure.
But I'll never forget that. And I ended up being a really good center fielder, and it was a lot of fun, and I got a lot of action there. And there aren't a lot of errors made in center field. There's a lot of errors made at shortstop.
Sure.
He did his shortstops alive.
Yeah.
Because that's where he played. He played middle. And then I'll never forget his BP.
Oh, everything right down the pipe.
And he would zip it, though, because he's like, I want you guys to be ready.
Yeah.
And basically what we were seeing was probably mid-80s from, I don't know, 40 feet or 30 feet. And we were always ready for harder pitching. But, yeah, I will always credit my knowledge and just my love for the game, honestly.
I know Michael Prince and Brian, they were coaching, at Champ, and they'd call Weedy just to throw BP some days. It's like, the guy's got the best BP.
He does.
It's right down the pipe, or he'll, we're working on this, he'll throw it right there, and you can just go to work, kind of deal.
He'd throw for days, too. Boom, boom, boom. And then he would come in, and he'd throw occasionally, too. And he wouldn't throw as hard, but he was still really good BP.
Yeah. You need to see it.
Yeah.
You need to see both, right?
Yeah.
You got the guy, who can paint and give you a firm fastball, and then you got a guy who will locate but also learn to show you to change his speed. So there's benefits to both.
Coach Wheaton would always give me flack for playing hockey in the off season and then coming in because I'd suck for like 2 weeks.
Yep.
And then once I kind of
It's
got into it, I was
period.
good.
Absolutely. That's what was fortunate from football to baseball. I
Yeah.
had that length to get my arm back to where it good because going back to that release point, it was shorter in football.
Hockey season went right into baseball season, so I didn't have any time. My hair was long. I had to cut my hair. The funniest was when he would always bring in players from like Winchester, like here and there, that just wanted to play for us, and they all had long hair. He'd always make them cut it.
Jim, he was a fun guy. I remember he pulled in a couple guys. I played with Trevor Eichwald, who was all the way from Purcell. I never heard of Purcellville when I was 9 years old, and Ashburn was just building up. You know, and he knew how to get guys there. And he had a successful term, creating these travel leagues. I think the Ashburn Astros were one of the first teams in this area to start with that thing. And then now look at it.
Right.
There's teams left and right. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
Does it take away from competition if there's so many more teams? Is it really travel ball anymore? Or is it just Little League that travels?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost like diluted in a sense. There's a lot of teams. But we're coming up on about 1 hour and 15. I mean, if you want to talk a little bit more, I kind of wanted to talk about if you're cool, if you're comfortable with it. You got aspirations to coach at a higher level, or what are your thoughts
So my
on
wife asked me that. She's like, "Cole, would you ever coach college?" I was like, one, I would have had to probably start earlier. Two, I was like, I love seeing you guys. The college aspects and college aspirations are great when you're at the head
Well,
spot.
it's also, I mean, it's a business again too. Yeah.
So, do I have any interest in it? Probably not. I like where I'm at. I love the kids I'm coaching with. I get to see my family all the time. When you become a college coach and you're the assistant, you are the recruiter, you are off and running for a long period of time. And
Traveling.
Yeah, traveling. And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, colleges might only have 2 paid coaching positions for a full college baseball team. There was an argument trying to get a third, or there was an argument trying to get a second.
So you're saying like head coach and hitting coach?
Yeah, head
get
coach,
paid?
and you're basically it's your head coach and your associate coach, which is also your recruiting coach. So
Okay.
if I was there, I'd be a pitching coach and maybe the recruiting coach. So I'd be traveling and working with pitchers. Do I think about it? Absolutely, because when you're at that level, everybody on your team wants to compete,
normal
and
not
it's
to,
fun. But I really like where I'm at. I think I like teaching the young kids. I like coaching the old kids. I like my family time. I get to see my daughter come to games. I get to see my wife come to games. Like, you should see our press box now. I don't know if you've been there lately, but it's completely redone.
From two and a half years ago?
We put
Well, I remember you guys were in the process of putting that locker room together.
locker room's been done, and the press box up beneath. We're working on getting a television in there too, so we can do video analysis.
Yeah.
But we put boards on the back. We put a big Tuscarora baseball logo. We got this new thing that's like whiteboard, and with it's. I gotta send you a picture when I can, but. It's basically a starting lineup thing with all these graphics on it that
That's
we're going to
cool.
hang outside of our press box, so families get to see who's the starting lineup in kind of this official way.
Yeah.
So for me, that's motivation in itself as a player. It's like, I want to see my name on that board.
Absolutely.
I want to see my name hitting third.
Yeah.
Or I want to see my name in that pitching spot. You know, I want to see.
It's a good feeling. It's a confidence boost. I remember when I was there and you guys were trying to figure out what the word that you like, the motto.
Oh yeah, that
you wanted to
lasted
put
like
up.
it was.
Well, what did you guys end up choosing?
Oh my gosh, I can't even remember, but it lasted like 2 weeks.
Because it was up to the seniors, and I think Niall and
Niall,
Drummond and those guys
Niall
were
did
seniors.
Linguini. He just yelled Linguini out every time. It's like, oh my god! But it got the team around it.
Yeah.
We came up with this article, of the Tuscarora, Native Americans, and they had this saying, and I was like, oh, this would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
That lasted like 2 weeks because Linguini sticked. Out of everything, Linguini sticked, and all you just hear him yell is Linguini, and everybody knew who it was Niall. And I miss that kid.
Yeah. Do you stay in touch with those guys?
Yeah, every once in a while they'll come back. I know the pandemic's kind of halted, but each year I've seen a few guys come back each year to come see the guys.
Did Faley? Did he?
Paley, yeah,
did he just graduate?
He last year would have been his senior year. So
Yeah,
he was
so he
one
was
of
a
the
part of that
seniors.
group. That's
and,
tough,
he's
'cause he was
playing-
super talented.
He's very good. He's playing at a community college right now, and then hopefully he'll go into a bigger school later.
Yeah. Kick and play.
So he's one of those kids that you would say fell through the cracks in terms of recruiting process.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the biggest kid in the world, but I mean, middle infield? Is that that's
yeah,
right.
he's a utility guy. He could probably play anywhere from second to third.
Yeah.
And he's a switch hitter. And he's smart. He is smart on the
I
baseball.
remember when he was in the process of switch hitting. Well, he already knew how to do it, but you hadn't been like, okay, I want you to switch hit now, just because I don't think he was ready yet.
He wasn't quite ready in terms of, all right, I'm going to go, lefty versus lefty.
That's
and
such a-
sometimes like that. So
To be able to switch hit, I mean, it's like speaking multiple languages in the real world.
Yeah.
It's just so much more attractive for a coach.
Oh, absolutely. And he was just smart. Like, you would ask him, hey, why'd you take that pitch? Just to see what's going on in his mind. And he had a great approach. And I was like, that's why you are free to do what you want at your plate. Because if
Right.
you can explain things, great. I know some coaches, and I know this goes in multiple places, that as a pitcher you can't shake off, right? My philosophy is, if you shake off, I'm okay with that, but you better tell me why you did it.
When you get back.
Because if you're feeling something, you need to communicate it with the coach. If you I needed this, because when you have a pitcher that is committed to the pitch that's called, it is going to be much better
I agree.
than a pitcher's not. If you call an 85-mile-an-hour fastball in the inside corner and he's not committed, it is much different than the same pitch when he is committed
That's
to
funny
it.
because I've experienced that firsthand. You were there, actually. It was after one of the games. We don't have to go too deep into it. But, Coach called one inside. I didn't feel comfortable with it. I actually stepped off, looked over, and he said, go with it. I went with it. And
Didn't work out.
And maybe it was my fault because I just didn't feel like that was the right pitch to throw, and I threw it because we didn't have the opportunity to shake off, and that's fine. Like a lot of different programs have different philosophies. Yours is different than the one I happen to be playing with, which I think is also a good philosophy because I'm 17.
Yeah,
you know,
how much do you know?
How much do I really know? Like, did I actually know if that? But again, it didn't work out, and it is what it is. It's probably because I didn't have confidence with it. But
And there's two aspects to that, right? There's like, all right, this kid is learning how to go with the game, right? So you're going to have these two coaching philosophies, and this is always a baseball argument: is do you let the catcher call the game, or do you call it to teach him how to call a game, and eventually he can prove to you that he has the knowledge of calling it?
yeah, but when do you take the training wheels off?
Correct. And it's also the other part of that argument is like, well, how are they going to learn to call it when you're calling the pitches? It's because they got to. It's like teaching, right?
Well, they'll call it differently too because their minds are different. Yeah.
And so one of my catchers asked, Coach, when can I call? And it's like, all right, I gave him a situation, and he gave me his pitches, and I disagreed with it, which is fine. And I told him my reason, and he goes, that's a good point. So I was like, I trust, and I wasn't calling the pitches at the time. The pitching coach was calling. I was like, I trust you to call the pitches. I don't trust him behind the dish yet until he's proven it. And that goes both ways,
That's
right?
fair.
And
Yeah,
if the
very
coach,
fair.
if you built trust, like, you won't shake off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? If I
Absolutely.
trust that coach is going to call the best pitch that I can, I'm going. I trust him. And that's kind of what it is.
Right.
So it's a balancing act. Can certain guys do it? All right, then that's when the training wheels come off.
Yeah.
There might be times in the game, all right, you're in the lead or you're losing. All right, go call the pitches. Let's see. This is your opportunity to show me that next game when it's 0-0 in the first inning, you can call the game.
Yeah.
You got to. It's a give and take kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's a correct answer to it. If you have, sometimes you're going to come across a kid who knows more baseball than you, and he's only 18. And when that happens, it's great because then you got this. Now I can go focus on something else.
Yeah, and you can also learn from them too. It's another different perspective.
Yep, it's that trust again.
Maybe not the most mature perspective that you're used to seeing, but I mean that's also a good quality in a coach is being able to listen to your players.
Yeah. And sometimes that's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is hard because
you think your way is the right way. It's hard. It is hard.
but you invest so much time. And when someone, and this can go for any profession.
You work for them.
And one of the best things I got is like, Coach, it is hard to make a living when you're relying on 14 to 18-year-olds. But at the same time, that's the business that you got into.
Right.
It's just hard because you invest so much time behind the hours of just practice on things that you can invest in. If someone disagrees in it and they don't do it respectfully, that gets under your skin a little bit. And that's something as a coach, you just keep growing. But it's an in and out. It goes back to that trust kind of deal.
Yeah. So we're getting towards the end here. There's a funny question I wanted to ask.
Oh, God.
And we actually got it from the Peanut Gallery. He just sent it to my phone.
Okay.
Have you ever been ejected from a game or gotten pretty close?
I thought I was going to get ejected my, oh boy.
We got time for the story.
First
so
year. My first year or second, and I got to make sure that I do this correctly. And I won't tell who we were playing. But if it was my players and parents, they probably know which one it is. And I had a buddy of mine who was sitting in the bleachers for the other team because he had a sibling playing for the team we were playing. And we were going in the game. We were extra innings. And it was obviously a tied game at the moment. And we had momentum. And there was a guy on third.
Were you guys hitting?
We were defense. And we threw a pass ball. Catcher got to it quick. Got the ball back. The runner froze at third. Then decided to go home. By the time, and this is, again, my vision and my opinion, so he could have completely saw different, or it could have been, just time to, call it, whatever. And we might have been losing by one, but we were moving. And the ball got there about a foot or two ahead of the runner.
To home plate.
And he called him safe. We put the tag in, we held it out because you don't ever hold the tag in. If you
Right,
were holding, don't ever hold it.
Out.
Not only does it knock it out, but it makes the umpire make a decision. If you hold it, then you can see if the glove moved
in and
and
out.
if it's up.
The
So if
V
you do the
tag or
V
the
tag
sweep.
in and out, it's out, and you show the ball, right? So then it puts him on the spot to make a call. And emotions were running high because that could have been our first place finish for the district season if we beat this team.
Yeah.
And it would have been the highest in school history.
It's a huge
And this
play.
was only my first year, so I'm a young, arrogant kid, trying to
prove
put a
point.
stamp on that program and showing how much this kid's worked. And we didn't get the call. and I went off. And after that game, I felt terrible, but at the same time, your kids deserve to be defended when they're giving their heart. That's when I choose my arguments. If my kids deserve that argument and I agree with them, I'm going. If they are not giving their 100% effort.
Builds a stronger bond.
Correct. If they're not getting 100% effort, it makes that decision a little bit harder because you're like, well, why would I risk the chance of getting ejected, putting the school at their sportsmanship award if you guys aren't giving me your everything at all? If you guys are giving me your effort, I will go out for anything, regardless if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
So when you build that, and they were, oh my God, the effort they put out that night was great. And I went off. And
where'd you have to go?
Home plate. I didn't get ejected. I thought I was going to.
No, I meant like after. Oh, you didn't get ejected. You were close. Okay.
I was close.
Okay,
Yeah, the question was close. I have never been ejected yet.
Okay.
But it was close. I thought I was going to.
Like a dirt kick away, maybe, from getting ejected.
Maybe. And maybe I'll do the Bobby Cox grenade throw from behind the mound. But
oh my gosh.
So we're at the plate, and I'm just in this poor guy's face, and I can't remember my exact words, but he never responded to me. I didn't get a response.
Did he look at you?
He looked at me. One of the things is I said, and this is not fair to anybody playing a game. I said, you took this away from the kids. Because from my point, the ball beat him by 1.5 feet. The tag was there, and it was out, right? So there's no evidence of the tag missing, in my opinion. Granted, he could have seen something different, and if he did, I apologize. But with the motions going on and the effort, the kids needed me to defend them, so I went out. He didn't say a word to me.
He didn't give you an explanation.
And that's probably what drove me nuts and made me think maybe I was right. When you don't give me an explanation.
Steam coming out of my ears. And he didn't want to be like, I made the wrong call.
Correct.
Because they're probably not going to say that.
If that was him, he could have just said, you know what, Coach, I understand you're heated. I know this is an emotional game. This is what I saw. That would have been it. Right? Yeah. If you can defend yourself and you can go. When I look at arguments to see if I need to umpire, and I umped when I was younger, and I'm sure there's more things I can learn, but I learned when in college we always had umpires come to practices to do a little, practice their things. And I would look. And I would look at a two-man crew to see where their rotations are. So if there is a call, did the umpires make the correct rotation to make that call? Because if they didn't, then you have your way in for your argument, whether you're right or wrong. In this case, it was fine. He was in the right position. So, it was probably just an emotional thing for me, and the kids. And I just felt like I had to go defend my boys. So I did. And what irritated me, it was just no response.
Right. Because shouldn't there be some sort of relationship between umpire and coach, whether that's, obviously not predetermined before, but there's definitely a level of respect, right? And that's what you probably felt disrespected.
Yeah, because I didn't get an explanation, and it was pivotal. It was absolutely pivotal. It shut down all momentum. It kind of just. And my buddy from the bleachers, he's like, Cole, I thought you did the right thing, and he was a competitive ball player. Like he could have played at the next level too. He's like, I thought you did the right thing. I thought he made the wrong call, and this is coming from the opposing thing. I don't care. I do care that the call's wrong. All.
That means it was probably pretty obvious, but yeah.
Could be, you know. And I don't care. Now that I think about it, I don't care that the call was wrong. We're all going to make calls. I'll make a wrong pitch. I'll make a wrong play. We're going to make it wrong.
People make mistakes.
What I care about is just an explanation. If I make the wrong call, you'd be like, yeah, Coach, this is what I saw. Unfortunately, it didn't go your way, but this is what I saw. I made the call to the best shot. Great. That's what you're supposed to do as an umpire, right? You're supposed to do that. I remember one call at first base, and the guy was safe by, he was past the bag before the ball got. And I look at the guy, it's like, what did you see? I saw the ball beat the runner. It's like, how'd you see it? It's like, you track the ball at the same time you track the runner come to first base. I was like, that's tough to do. What I learned is when you're doing a call at first base, you got to hear it, right? So you're watching the runner, the ball or the runner to touch the base, and you're listening for the ball, right? You can't see two things moving at the same time. Right, so he had no response to that. But it's tough because umpires are so pivotal to our game, and baseball coaches, we all have hot heads. We are probably...
And there's no review at the high school level.
Right. So we're looking at it, and, and there's umpires. I have my old assistant AD, Scott Valier. He's an umpire, so I always talk to him about certain things.
Is he?
Mm-hmm. And he's going back to Broad Run as a counselor now.
Okay.
And he's an umpire.
Yeah, because I think he was the AD when I was there, or maybe it was Kirby.
He was a counselor when you were there.
Okay.
And he's just a great guy to talk to. He's like, I have no problem with coaches coming to argue with me. That's kind of what you sign up for. It's just there needs to be a
of the job.
communication part for it, right? And it's
right.
like, and if you establish that, and that trust and relationship between umpires establishes more than just one game. Sometimes we're lucky we get a few of the repeating umpires, and we have that relationship kind of deal. We know, when you sign up to be an umpire, there might be some close calls that is going to get a coach heated, and I try to do my job. There might be a conversation, go to the umpire and be like, you know what, you made the right call, but I got to come out here and talk to you. Because they're busting it to make sure they're doing their best that they can. It's only certain times, and that can be the competitive, and it can be a learning thing for me. I'm still a young guy. I'm still learning how to communicate with umpires and how to emotionally keep my mind in check. But at sometimes you need to defend the guys that you spent 365 days with, giving everything your all.
Yeah.
And whether you're right or wrong, you need to go out and defend them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of deal. So almost.
I think that's actually a great place to kind of stop. Can we watch you guys play this year, or is there going to be any?
Depends on the protocol. Right now for winter sports, there's nobody in attendance. They are filming live though.
So is the spring? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, winter sports. Because I've seen wrestling matches.
Sure.
So
the
would it be
spring,
something along those lines? Would they be? Maybe?
I can ask, and if we can get an okay ahead of time, I can put you in our press box, which would basically be you, and you'd be fine.
Boom.
So give us a head time, and I'll talk to our AD, and we can see if we can get something clear.
Yeah, I'd be happy to come watch some games.
Absolutely.
But Cole Shain, thank you very much.
Oh, you got it.
Baseball coach at Tuscarora.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Blast. Good job.
Oh, the last thing that we always do every single time.
TPow Studios.
We say TPow Studios.
Yeah, let them know where you are.
TPow Studios.
Yeah, Taggart Powell Studios.
got it.
TPow Studios.
TPow Studios.
There we
Oh,
go.
what is it? The Cole concussion theory? What is it?
Oh,
CC?
what do you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, what do you mean? Oh, Mitch Griffiths, he came up with an idea for my podcast name before I established it, and he said you should do the Cole Taggart experience, like CTE. But
Isn't
then
that
it's
very
also
similar to the Joe Rogan experience.
yeah, well, it's the Joe Rogan experience, but the CTE ends up concussion thing.
Got
I
it.
guess it's not really a laughable thing, but I've had a lot of concussions in my
Sure.
day, so. But yeah, I think we're good.
All
Thanks,
right,
Cole.
sweet. You got it, man.
That was fun.